It was supposed to be just another awards ceremony. Polished shoes, designer gowns, carefully worded speeches. A night of safe reverence for a man whose legacy has been made just digestible enough to package neatly into primetime TV. But this year, the mask slipped. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Let me ask you something. What do you think happens when a crown walks into a room built on blood, struggle, and legacy and expects applause? What happens when the applause doesn't come? What happens when it's replaced by silence, and then by something even sharper? Laughter, but not the kind you want. This isn't the kind of story that explodes all at once. It doesn't hit you with fireworks. No, this one creeps. It lingers. It builds like pressure under marble. You think it's polished and solid until it cracks. And when it does, everyone looks for the fault line. Tonight, we trace that fault line, not just through one woman's choices, but through a culture's breaking point. Because what happened at the 2026 MLK Beloved Community Awards wasn't just uncomfortable. It was seismic. The moment Meghan Markle walked into the room, the air shifted. But it wasn't awe. It was confusion. Why was she here? This wasn't a red carpet. It wasn't a Netflix premiere. It was a celebration of legacy. Dr. King's legacy. One rooted in sacrifice, in action, in community uplift, not celebrity presence. And yet, there she was. Front row. Perfect posture. Immaculate styling. Smile like armor. Next to her, silence. Not because people didn't notice her, but because they did. Now pause right there. Let's be honest. Meghan Markle's presence at any public event is going to draw attention. That's just reality. Whether you admire her, criticize her, or remain suspiciously on the fence, you react. She's polarizing by design, or maybe by accident. That part's up for debate. But the room that night wasn't designed for polarization. It was built, quite literally, for communion, legacy, collective celebration. So, when Aldis Hodge took the stage, people expected another round of carefully prepared lines. A safe speech. A tribute to the values Dr. King stood for. Instead, what they got was something else. Something raw. You'll hear the clip later. But not yet. Not before you understand what led to it, and what followed. Let me frame this for you. Aldis Hodge, acclaimed actor, activist, and master of delivering meaning between silences, didn't just give a speech. He issued a challenge. Not by name. Not directly. But unmistakably. It was in the phrasing. The cadence. The way his eyes didn't scan the audience but locked, momentarily, on one person in the front row. He spoke of those who inherit platforms they never built. Who claim the struggle but never carried the burden. Who speak our language but never paid our dues. No names. But every eye turned to her. The crowd didn't cheer. They paused. Held their breath. Some looked down at their programs, not sure where this was going. And then came the phrase. 3 words. Simple. But loaded. Yacht. Princess. Make. Said almost in passing. Almost like an improv joke. But the room heard it. Every syllable. And the explosion that followed? Not laughter. Not outrage. Whispers. Gasps. And a single, sharp, delighted like someone had been waiting for it. Now, maybe you're thinking, why does this matter? Why is it important what 2 actors said on stage at a relatively small, if culturally significant, event? Because this wasn't about Meghan. Not really. It was about the moment when a room built on black excellence, black pain, and black joy said, no more performances. It was the moment a space, sacred in its purpose, rejected the idea that celebrity equals contribution, that proximity to blackness equals belonging, that suffering by association qualifies as authenticity. There's a difference between showing up for the community and showing up in it. And on that night, 2 voices, Anika Noni Rose and Aldis Hodge, called out that difference without ever raising their voices. Not once. And that made it cut deeper. But let's pull back for a moment. Because it's not as simple as they attacked Meghan. That framing is lazy and wrong. What happened was bigger. This was a cultural mirror, held up gently, but deliberately. It said, if you want our applause, you better come correct. And Meghan? She wasn't ready. That's not an opinion. It's what the room felt. You know how you can sometimes see discomfort before it registers? The way someone adjusts their seat, or repositions their hands to seem relaxed but only looks more rigid. That happened. And if you think the cameras caught it all, think again. We've got off-the-record accounts, seating chart leaks, rehearsal notes, even an unused press release from Meghan's team, never published, but very, very revealing. All of it paints a very different picture than the one being spun by the Palace of PR. Because here's the thing about the MLK Beloved Community Awards. They're not about Hollywood. They're about home. And this year, home said, you can't just visit. Not like this. But you might be asking, why now? Why this year? Why Meghan? Why the sudden shift from cautious acceptance to pointed rejection? Because timing matters. In 2026, the cultural mood is different. We've seen the rise and fall of curated narratives. We've watched platforms built on social justice turn into branding campaigns. And people are tired. Tired of applause for effort. Tired of shallow allyship. Tired of crowns placed on heads that never bled. And when Anika took the mic that night, oh, we'll get to that moment. It wasn't just a performance. It was a reclaiming. An act of subtle defiance against the notion that every space must bend to celebrity. Let me tell you now, when she said, not everyone who holds a mic is a voice, the room froze. You'll hear that line later. In full. In context. But just know, it wasn't written in the script. That was personal. Not petty. Not cruel. Just personal. And what followed? You'll see. Before we dive into the chapters ahead, let's be clear. This is not a takedown piece. It's a reckoning. With how we reward image over integrity. With how we allow access to mean acceptance. With how we confuse good branding with good faith. This story isn't about hating Meghan. It's about watching a room full of people, artists, activists, elders, choose to protect something sacred. And choosing to do it out loud. What you're about to hear, in the next chapters, will make you uncomfortable. It should. You'll hear truths that were whispered, voices that weren't amplified in the press coverage, statements that were made, then walked back, and then reconfirmed once the cameras were off. You'll hear from people who were in the room. You'll see footage that never made it to the live stream. You'll read the email that nearly pulled Meghan from the guest list before the show even started. But more importantly, you'll feel it. The shift, the silence, the sound of a room. Once open, once gracious, closing its doors without slamming them, just not opening them again. And by the end, you'll understand why this night may go down as one of the quietest, most devastating public resets in recent cultural memory. Not because of what was shouted, but because of what was allowed to hang in the air. You ready? Because the next thing that happened, well, let's just say no one expected a standing ovation for what wasn't said. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. You ever see a moment that doesn't just break the illusion, it shatters the whole stage? You know the type. Not loud, not violent, just decisive. The kind of moment that doesn't ask for applause because it already knows its own power. That's what this was. Not a takedown, not a gotcha, but something sharper and harder to recover from. Indifference. Earned. Calculated. Cold. The tension didn't start when Meghan walked in. It started hours before that. See, the MLK Beloved Community Awards isn't just a ceremony. It's memory in motion. It's where the past breathes through the present, not in nostalgia, but in responsibility. Every year, the room is filled with people who carry the weight of that responsibility. Activists who marched, mothers who buried sons, artists who gave up careers for truth, pastors, organizers, elders with tired hands and steel in their spines. And next to them, Meghan Markle. What do you feel when you hear that? Because that's what the room was asking itself, quietly, but intensely, even before the lights dimmed. Why her? Why this year? What exactly did her presence represent? Legacy or leverage? Because here's where it gets sticky. There's a difference between honoring Dr. King and using him. One is rooted in reverence, the other in relevance. Guess which one this room had already seen too many times? Let me walk you into the room. It's the Fox Theater in Atlanta. Opulent, historic, and sacred in its own right. Not because of who's performed there, but because of what's been said there. It holds ghosts. Not the spooky kind, the righteous kind. The kind of ghosts that whisper in your ear, you better get this right. The air was thick, not with smoke or heat, but with expectancy, a slow boil. Everyone could feel something was coming. They just didn't know what yet. And then the arrivals. Civil rights leaders, local organizers, a few quiet celebrities, The type who don't dress the part, but are the part. And then Meghan, escorted, smiling, framed by light. She wasn't early. She was timed. Almost perfectly. And that's when it started. The optics. Because let's not kid ourselves, Meghan doesn't move without message. Her entire presence, every thread of her gown, every angle of that posture, was intentional. And that's not a critique. It's just fact. She knows how to be seen. But that night, that's not what the room wanted. They wanted someone to witness, not perform. And the moment it felt like performance, you could feel the room pull back. Just a bit. Just enough. Like a tide shifting before the storm. Now let's pause here. Because some people, even now, will say, she was invited. She had every right to be there. And yes, she was on the list. But that doesn't answer the real question. Why was she on the list? And more importantly, who fought to put her there? We'll get to that. But first, we have to talk about what this event actually is and what it's not. It's not a photo op. It's not a branding opportunity. It's a spiritual checkpoint. Every year, the Beloved Community Awards asks the same thing. Are we still walking toward the dream? Or are we dressing it up to hide how far we've drifted? And this year, that question hit harder than ever. Because what happens when you invite a figure like Meghan Markle into that space? A space defined by humility and service. And she brings optics? That's the word that kept coming up. Backstage. In the aisles. In the press pit. Optics. Not intention. Not legacy. Not truth. Just optics. Now here's where it starts getting uncomfortable. Because Meghan wasn't the only guest that night who came dressed in PR. But she was the only one the cameras seemed to chase. And that right there, that chase, that's what cracked the atmosphere. Because legacy doesn't beg for flashbulbs. Legacy walks slow. It lets the work speak. It doesn't need handlers or perfectly timed entrances. It doesn't pose. It prays. And here's the contradiction. The one that made the tension unbearable. Meghan has built her entire post-royal identity on activism. On alignment with justice. With truth-telling. With being seen as a voice for the voiceless. But that night, the people who usually have no voice, they had a mic. And they weren't asking for alignment. They were asking for accountability. And that's where the optics start to crack. Let me take you behind the curtain. According to two separate sources, one a senior organizer, the other part of the logistics team, Meghan's appearance wasn't originally on the table. Not until 3 weeks out. Not until a certain PR firm, the name of which we will withhold for now, reached out with a proposal. Honor Meghan with a guest appearance. Frame it as carrying forward the legacy of Dr. King through modern humanitarian work. Sounds good on paper. Looks great on Instagram. But to the people in that room, the ones who've lived that legacy, it sounded hollow. Like someone trying to borrow a legacy they never earned. And here's the painful part. At least one board member pushed back. Strongly. They felt the event was being hijacked by celebrity culture. They weren't wrong. But they lost. Because there were other pressures. Funding. Exposure. Media interest. And that's the contradiction no one wants to admit. Not even now. Sometimes, legacy gets sold to the highest bidder, just to keep the lights on. So now the stage is set. A room full of people who've earned their place. Every scar, every night spent marching, every community center built from scratch. And in walks someone who's known mostly for leaving places. Hollywood. England. Family. And the irony? She came to this event to belong. But what she walked into was resistance. Not the kind with signs or shouting. Something worse. Polite distance. Respectful coldness. A collective quiet that said, we see you, but we don't feel you. And that's when the mask started to slip. Because Meghan is a master at controlling the room when it's built for her. But this one wasn't. This one was built for truth. And truth doesn't care about your Netflix deal. So when Aldis Hodge stepped to the mic, people weren't expecting heat. They expected polish. A nice tribute. A few quotes. Maybe a rehearsed smile toward Meghan's table. What they got instead was something else. Something harder. A recentering. A reminder of why they were there. And who the night was not about. That's where this chapter leads. Because what Aldis said wasn't personal. But it landed that way. And once he opened his mouth, everything changed. But what he didn't say out loud, that was even louder. And the next 3 words? They would burn the script, the seating chart, and the silence clean off the walls. I'll show you exactly how that unfolded in just a moment. But first, let me ask you something.